listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League daily episode for February 4th, 2018. Today I'm joined by Overwatch caster and analyst for Full Circle, Kevin Averill Walker, to discuss the big three in Overwatch League. That's the Seoul Dynasty, New York Excelsior, and London Spitfire, in no specific order. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at the scoreboard brought to you by patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. In a David versus Goliath story, the Shanghai Dragons, who have yet to win a match all season, take on the London Spitfire, who are coming off of a big win against the Seoul Dynasty. This one starts on Eichenwald, where the Dragons struggle to get anything going on offense, not even managing to get a single tick on point A. London would turn around with a quick capture with 3:06 remaining and take an early lead 1-0. On Horizon Lunar Colony, the Dragons would continue to struggle, only managing to capture just shy of 2/3 of point A, before London would turn around and win the map with over 2 minutes to spare and go up 2-0 at halftime. After the intermission, we go to Ilios. Shanghai came out strong on runes with a 99-0 lead before they would lose it and then lose the well stage and go down 3-0. On Junkertown, it's more of the same. Shanghai fails to get point A. London takes an easy win here, 4-0, and the Shanghai Dragons continue to struggle. It's no secret that the Dallas Fuel are struggling to find their place in Overwatch League. On the other side, NYXL have solidified themselves as one of, if not the best, team in Overwatch League right now. Things didn't start out as hoped for the Fuel, as they would get nearly full held on offense, securing just 67% of the point. NYXL would turn around and capture the objective quickly. The Fuel go down 1-0. The Fuel looked a bit better on Temple of Anubis, as this one would go 3 full rounds. In the end, NYXL would take this one though 6-4. NYXL are ahead 2-0 at halftime. A glimmer of hope for the Fuel on Oasis, as they would narrowly defeat NYXL 2-1 thanks to a heroic last-minute capture. NYXL have never lost on Oasis, and Pine has never lost a map, but the Fuel put a stop to that yesterday. On Dorado, the Fuel looked to take it to a tiebreaker map. NYXL put up an impressive defense, stopping the Fuel not too far past point A. Despite a strong defensive effort from Dallas, New York would win the map and win the series 3-1. NYXL improves to 7-1, while the Dallas Fuel fall to 1-7 and 10th overall in the league. This week of matches ends with a very important match: the Boston Uprising taking on the LA Valiant. The Uprising have been on a roll lately, defeating the Gladiators, Fuel, and Spitfire in their previous 3 games. Of course, the Valiant have held steady at 5-2 going into this match. We start on Eichenwald, where despite a strong defensive hold on point A for the Valiant, Boston would rally and walk the payload for the rest of the map with just under a minute to spare. On offense, the Valiant were dominant, finishing the map with over 2.5 minutes. This is where it gets interesting. With 1 minute in the time bank at the beginning of the next round, Boston finishes the entire map, so it's up to the Valiant with 2.5 minutes to finish. Boston holds strong on point A defense, and the Valiant begin their payload push in overtime. In the end, Dreamcasper would harass the Valiant from the skies as Farah and force them off the cart. Boston takes the map 6-4 and goes up 1-0. On Horizon Lunar Colony, Boston assaults point B immediately after taking point A with a 4 ultimate advantage and take point B with 5 minutes left. The Uprising then hold the Valiant to just 1 point and go up 2-0 at halftime. After the break, we would go to Oasis, where Boston would continue to show their dominance as Dreamcasper and the Uprising would take the map 2-0. Boston wins the match, but now it's to Junkertown to see if they can sweep the Valiant. Boston finishes the map before holding Los Angeles just shy of point B and completing the sweep 4-0. Boston now finds themselves 5th in the standings at 5-3, while the Los Angeles Valiant fall to 6th. Hey Averill, welcome back. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Up until this last week, there have been 3 teams who have consistently performed above the rest: Seoul, London, and NYXL. With their recent losses, do you think that there are any other teams that can sit in the big 3?
From a mathematical perspective, London and New York have their positions secured. They're both sitting at 7-1, and I don't see any way they don't make the Stage 1 playoffs in their current position. The point of contention right now is in Seoul's third place seat. They're currently sitting at 6-2 in the standings. If they get upset again next week, there's actually 4 teams at 5-3 nipping at their heels that could take Seoul's playoff spot. So, in order from 4th to 7th position, you've got Houston, Boston, LAV, and Philadelphia. Everybody from 8th place onwards is kind of out of playoffs race at this stage, but there's still some upset potential there that could ruin one of the teams sitting at 5-3's chances. The most important match next week will be LA Valiant versus Seoul, where there are some huge implications here because all 4 of the 5-3 contenders, including Valiant, need Seoul to lose this match. Seoul's only other match that week is against San Francisco, which in their current form are unlikely to be the ones upsetting Seoul. So if Valiant can beat Seoul, they'll be in the pole position to take third, as they're expected to also beat the Dragons afterwards as well. Boston also have a huge week ahead of themselves as well. They're specifically going up against 2 of the other 5-3 contenders, and both their matches versus Houston and Philly will decide the fate of all 3 teams, as these are must-win matches for everybody. The losers will not have a chance to challenge for third. Breaking down the tiebreaker scenario though, assuming Seoul are upset by Valiant, who Seoul then go on to take one back against Shock, Seoul's final standing will be at 7-3. That means that any of the 4 teams remaining at 5-3 that win both their matches and also finish at 7-3 will get the opportunity to tie-break Seoul, and each other if there are other teams at 7-3 at the end based on map differential. Houston currently sit in the best position for map differential, as they're currently at plus 14 in terms of maps, while Seoul are currently only on plus 11, and that's despite Seoul actually being a hidden match score above the Houston. The next best team is Boston at plus 7, who are going to need Seoul to lose at least 5 maps next week, while they themselves go 8-0. At the end of the day, though, Valiant are the ones with the heavy shoulders next week, and if they can't get the job done, all eyes are going to be on Shock, where the hopes and dreams of all remaining Western teams rest, and you can bet Seoul will also be out for blood to hold on to their top 3 position.
There's something that I just haven't quite been able to put my finger on, and that's Boston's upset over London. What's your take on that match?
As with everyone, I was surprised, but pleasantly so. Boston were one of the teams with the most improved coming into the league. They were almost universally placed 12th on everyone's preseason power rankings, and now they're in top 3 contention for Stage 1. The timing cannot be understated as well. My preseason analysis was that pickup rosters like Boston would need to spend more time to synergize, and even if they were to take big steps in improvement, we would be unlikely to see those results until stages 2 to 4. Nobody expected Boston to have improved this much this quickly, and the nobody in this equation is particularly relevant to teams that have underestimated and subsequently lost to Boston. London in particular paid that price in full. Something that I think Boston has done quite well since the start of the season is finding and then sticking with a core roster that works. They've kept 5 of the current 6 starting members in Dreamcasper, Striker, Gamsu, Neko, and Calyx since the start of the season, and have only made 1 change, moving Note in for Kalios. That change specifically only happened after Boston's loss to San Francisco, just as they headed into what would be their upset victory over London. Now, that upset may also mark the last time we see Fury and Nuss for Stage 1, as London are now utilizing either the majority of, if not the whole GC Busan half of their roster. What's interesting is this thematically feels like London achieving parity with Boston, and that both teams suffered big losses against opponents they probably should have beaten, then making slight adjustments before coming back stronger and on a higher level than where they left off. I don't think it would be fair to blame Fury and Nuss for London's loss to Boston, but it was clear something needed to change for London moving forward. Before even heading into the Boston match, London were widely considered to be the weakest of the 3 Korean squads, and since making changes, have gone in to beat Seoul 4-0, so I'd say it's hard to argue with those kind of results. And Boston have also come in huge as underdogs in that match. 3 losses at the time, including 1 to both of the other Korean squads and 1 to Shock. This was not a team that London had any reason to respect, but Boston ended up being the straw that broke London's back anyway. Now that match that got That was the match that finally got heads turning the way of Boston, and since then they've beaten Dallas, they've swept both LA teams. I think it's time for everyone to start paying attention to Boston now. Note said in his post-match interview yesterday that it's time to stop underestimating them and time to practice for Boston, and I can't help but agree. They beat London in Week 3, they 4-0'd LA Valiant last night. At what point are they allowed to finally be considered good?
In the past with Overwatch esports, it's kind of been the Korean teams and then the rest of the world, with every once in a while a Western team kind of being able to compete with those top Korean teams. Do you think that that gap will continue to close with the Overwatch League format?
I think the gap has narrowed somewhat, and faster than anyone had anticipated as well. As previously mentioned, especially for teams like Boston, you really don't expect Western teams to be taking down full Korean rosters until maybe stages 2 to 4. Right now, the only Korean team still undefeated against Western teams is Seoul, and that could still change by the end of next week. Seoul look wounded, and this would be the perfect time to knock them down in the standings. Both Houston and Dallas have had extremely close run-ins with Seoul so far, and the Outlaws match in particular notably had Linksa on the bench, so despite losing that, Houston's going to get another chance to hunt big game next week when they face off against a freshly rejuvenated London, who did what Western teams could not in convincing fashion by beating Seoul. Next week's matches are going to be extremely important for teams to prove whether they have reached a new level or if previous wins and close calls versus Korean teams were just flukes. Valiant in particular have a lot to prove against Seoul. They've already had a close encounter with London in Week 2, and with their track record so far in the season, I think they've earned at least one free pass on their loss against Boston, but if Valiant don't at least make it a close affair versus Seoul, there are going to be some serious questions raised against what was once touted as the best Western team in the league. One important thing I think can't be underestimated or understated is that whenever there's a conversation regarding the Korean divide, the Korean teams themselves are also still improving. This is definitely not a scenario where only the Western teams are making progress, catching up while the Koreans sit around and wait. The better question in this scenario would actually be, how much further can the Korean teams go, and how fast and far can they go with the potential versus the rate of improvement of Western teams? The other factor in terms of ingenuity through mentality. Is it a case of Western teams only being capable of looking at Korean teams to learn from, or can they also pioneer their own path beyond what the Koreans are doing? If you're always following in the footsteps of Korea, you'll never actually overtake them. This inaugural season of Overwatch League is going to be the most important for Western development. Once we head into localized home games, you're not going to have this concentration of top-tier talent across the entirety of the same region in the same location. So in this case, the current format of the league is hugely beneficial for logistical reasons, at least. 40 regular season league matches per team is definitely a huge boon for development. We're already seeing upsets as early as Stage 1, and I don't think the majority of teams have even come close to hitting their ceiling just yet. Beyond that, it's going to be up to the teams to decide whether we see a Korea versus Korea Grand Final at the end of the league, or something else, and in that case, the teams are well beyond the help of the league's format.
Especially before their defeat of Seoul, there's been a lot of people who would question NYXL's ability to be a top team in Overwatch League. Where do you stand on NYXL as a team?
I think New York's results speak for themselves pretty clearly. First tied equal with London, and second in map differential by a difference of 1, 3 higher than the next opponent in Houston, which they've already beaten. There is without a doubt New York will be finishing in the top 3 for Stage 1. The only question remaining is where in that top 3, as they've still got a match against London to be answered. Their only loss is against Philly, which is arguably less of an upset than London's loss to Boston. Their only other close match was versus Seoul as a 3-2 victory. Every other win has been a 3-1 or better. New York have the best trace and the best in-yard in the league. The roster is highly flexible, and out of 8 players, you have 7 you'd be comfortable running against any opponent. They're also the only team that I feel have truly found a distinct identity between 3 DPS players, which allows them to be interchangeable with far less negative implications. You could feasibly play any combination of the 3 between Liberose, BLB, and Pine and have predictable results. That's a stark difference to other teams where They may have 3 or 4 DPS players, but they have major identity flaws with incompatibility problems stemming from overlapping hero pools, communication or leadership deficits, or significant skill discrepancies. I think the evidence is pretty clear that, at least for this stage, New York is deservedly a dominating team and an easy favorite for the league. The adaptability of the team is going to be the major question moving forward. Can they maintain their position at the top 3 or in the top over 3 or more stages and survive meta shifts and mid-season roster shakeups?
So I know these aren't your favorite questions, but I love to hear you speculate a little bit. If these aren't your big 3, Seoul, NYXL, and London, which teams would be in your top 3 in Overwatch League?
The 3 Korean teams currently in the top 3 are definitely the big 3 teams of Overwatch League right now, but Koreans aside, the next 3 teams that have been really impressive in Stage 1 and are a real contender to steal a spot on the ladder as early as next week are Houston, Boston, and LA Valiant. I really wanted to include Philadelphia on there, but first of all, you didn't give me a space for 4, but also I think of the 4 teams, Fusion is the only one that suffers from huge inconsistency issues over the course of the season so far. Both Boston and Houston had a slow start, but are now in the best state yet. Valiant, outside of yesterday, have been extremely consistent in that they lose to Koreans, but they crush other Western teams. I think we can call their loss to Boston an anomaly, at least for now, until we see how they go in their Week 5 results. Fusion have been the only team that's been kind of all over the place to me. Their results are highly unpredictable. They edged out a win over Houston before them being embarrassed by London in the same week, handing New York their only loss, but then barely beating Dragons the next day, and then getting swept by Valiant the week after. Of the other teams, I do have my eyes firmly peeled for the upcoming Stage 2 roster shakeups. New players coming in could make a big impact on the league. Sinatra's been hyped up since before the preseason even began. AKM's been number 1 on the free agent list for some time now as well. I'm going to have my eyes on Shock and Dallas in particular to see if these 2 squads can rise to the occasion for Stage 2.
My thanks to AVRL for stopping by on today's show. To make sure to follow him on Twitter at IamAVRL. That's I'm AVRL. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or your podcast app of choice to not miss future episodes. You can also watch or listen to the show on winstonslab.com. You can also find links to everything at overwatchleaguedaily.com. And if you have any questions or comments for the show, send me an email at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com. Thanks again to AVRL for joining me. I'll be back on Wednesday for another episode of Overwatch League Daily.